Thank you for your time. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate you being here. This is not food for thought. This is shooting from the hip. So please keep in mind that what we are doing here on Bet On It, Food for Thought and Shooting from the Hip, we explore human ideas, philosophies, noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, jumping into ideas, examining and re-examining them. You will find we are prone to using adult language and expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe anything we say. We are not experts of any kind. We are just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information in the hopes that you will find it interesting and fun. We encourage you to invest time in searching out these subjects and come to your own conclusions. Now on with the shit show. I'm Betula, my steady companion and aide, Slim.
Hey.
Plus one. Would you like to introduce yourself,
Hey.
or just you're good with just plus one?
No.
Okay, so on today's episode of Shooting from the Hip, we're going to talk about non-human intelligence, but more specifically, we're going to talk about sperm whales because something very interesting has been going on the last couple of years with regards to them, and that animal being looked at as potentially being, well, highly intelligent, and not just highly intelligent enough that we could potentially communicate with them, because they demonstrate the capacity to communicate amongst themselves. Now we're going to get into we're going to get really into the thick of it, because we're going to look at the available information, and I think you'll agree that it's one of those, it's a subject where you go, it's kind of compelling. What there is for evidence is super suggestive, and the research is ongoing. So it's been going on for the last 2 years. So I'd like to start by reading an opening statement that I'm hoping you'll enjoy. So with the abundance of UAPs or UFOs, it's perhaps it's excited the imagination with regards to non-human intelligence. So there's an interesting statement that James Nestor makes, and he says that in the next decade, consider this, the US is going to spend $100 million looking for signs of non-human intelligent life in the universe. But there's already a non-human intelligent life on our planet. It's in our seas, dolphins and whales. All right, so just to set this up so we can get a bit of an understanding, I'm going to go through some interesting facts with regards to sperm whales, and then we'll lead into the case for intelligence and language. So sperm whales, or otherwise known as cachalot, I think is how it's pronounced, or Physeter macrocephalus. So macrocephalus, which just means big head, right? So and it's interesting to note. So they're the largest toothed whales, and they're the largest of the toothed whales and the largest toothed predator with a worldwide range. So they don't their habitat's not limited to any particular region of the ocean. All the oceans of the world are basically their playground. Their brain is the largest known of any modern or extinct animal, weighing in at 7.8 kilograms or 17 pounds. Larger brains generally correlate as higher intelligence. So that alone is kind of suggestive, right? They live on average about 70 years, right? So it's kind of comparable to human beings. Their average length is about 16 meters. That's 52 feet, right? And 1/3 of that length is the head. So remember, macrocephalus, enormous head. And it's significant too, and we'll get to that. Sperm whales produce short duration sounds, signals called clicks. These clicks they produce are in a 10 to a 30 hertz range frequency band. So the hertz are cycles per second, right? So the sperm whales vocalize almost constantly. So they're constantly you hear this clicking sound. 75% of these clicking sounds are their echolocation. So that's a biological sonar. So that's how they see in in water. So essentially, the water being a largely dark environment, it's only lit within the first, like say, 15 to 20 feet, and then after that, it's just dark. So, and their echolocation gives them exceptional acuity in diving in the dark, and that's how they see their world largely. They see it through sound, right? But that remaining 25% has been observed as being communication. Now, all whales they're known for producing whale sounds, but unlike most other whales, they just repeat the same song over and over and over again. That 25% of the echolocation, or that them vocalizing, the sperm whales, it has the appearances of like interplay or conversation going on between different individuals, right? So that's how it starts. They can let's see here. They're either now they usually primarily define their prey because they are, being a toothed animal, they are predators, right? They're the largest predator on the planet so far, currently. Anyway, they also happen to be the loudest animal or mammal, for that matter, on the planet. Their vocalizations reach an astonishing 230 decibels. Okay, so to give context to that, a jet engine that's 100 feet away from you produces about 140 decibels, right? So around 150 decibels, your eardrums will burst, right? And the threshold for death is estimated to be in the range of 180 to 200 decibels. So if you were caught in a blast of their echolocation at their upper ranges, it would kill you. it's kind of trippy, yeah, right. So again, even if you just focused on the whales themselves, stuff like this is fascinating, right? But it gets even more crazy and more interesting. That that they might actually be the only other intelligence on the planet that's truly intelligent, right? So now, whether it's comparable to ours, that's further down the discussion. We'll get to it, right? So everything right now, so it all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so sound travels differently underwater than it does through air, which means that those 200 plus decibel clicks are far more amplified in water than they are in air. And because water is denser than air, the sound is measured in a different decibel scale. In air, the sperm whales would still be extremely loud, but significantly less so. They'd only be about 174 decibels, so it'd still be enough to shatter your eardrums, right? So, but because they're in water, that's what gives them that, amplifies that, it gives them that additional range. But that additional range allows for them to communicate virtually anywhere on the planet with any other member of their species. Doesn't matter where they are. So you could be at the top of the Pacific and at the bottom of the Pacific, if there was such a thing as the top and bottom. So the northernmost part to the most southern part, and they'd be able to communicate, right? So it again, talk about making your cell phones look kind of obsolete, and it's entirely organic. It has nothing to do with machines, right? So how do they generate such powerful sound? So this is again another interesting fact with regards to the sperm whales themselves. So they pass air through these nasal passages, which is subsequently forced through two lips called monkey lips at the front of their nose. So think of like a balloon. When you grab a balloon, you blow it up, and then you squeeze the air out. That's how they basically produce the clicks. So they fill up their lungs and then force the air out under pressure, and then use those skin flaps to modulate and change the shape of the opening to produce the sounds, right? So the production of sound is similar to air passing through the neck of a balloon, right? So we already talked about that. So and the sound is then amplified by a fatty waxed filled organ called the spermaceti organ, which sits at the top of their skull. And the clicks that bounce off this portion of the skull are directed back outward through the spermaceti organ. So all this stuff works together to give them the volume or the decibel range that they get. That's how they do it. So it's not just passing the air through it. It's bouncing like the sound that are created through that huge organ that they have on their forehead, which is where all their was filled with oil. All right, so that's what produces the sound. It's estimated sperm whales can hear one another hundreds, perhaps even thousands of miles away using this technique. Right, so literally, it makes everything that we do look like we're barely doing anything. Okay, so what's significant about this spermaceti or sperm whale? Okay, that's first of all is where the whale gets its name from, and it was a prime target of the whaling industry a couple hundred years ago, and they were hunted for this oil. That sac is what they were hunted for, and it's funny. We used the oils from that sac for oil lamps, lubricants, and candles. Right? So can you imagine, eh? And it might have been like, hunting the equivalent of your neighbor you could talk to and stuff and go, hey, I like all that oil in your forehead. Okay.
It's really incredible. They can talk so far, like across the ocean, and then also to receive it. That's at least two complications in it.
Well, so that it speaks to how sensitive they are to the sound and being not only to send but to receive it. So, and that's how well they're designed for their environment. They live in a liquid world, right? And so you couldn't have an animal, I think, that large on land. I don't think it could function. What kind of legs would it require? But in a medium like water where it displaces its own weight, it doesn't really. There's no requirement for the legs to support it. They just in water they produce locomotion. It's dry, right? So what passes for their lower fins for us would be our legs, and that's essentially what they use for thrust to get through the water, right? Move through the medium of water, and they use their fins, their upper fins, which would be the equivalent of our arms, to steer. So it almost makes you wonder why they'd even have eyes. Like, I mean, I guess in the more shallower water, they could probably see. And think about where their eye placement is. So they'd have 180 degrees this way, 180 degrees this way, but directly in front of their snout, they'd be probably blind, like in terms that they couldn't see. But with the echolocation,
they're the hammerhead. Just eyes on the side. Can't see
yeah. Well, but it's just because of its size. Think how massive it is. So it's got really limited vision, but it makes up for that with this supremely powerful biological sonar, right? So tons of really interesting facts. Not that I'm a whale guy or I love animals any more or less than say the average person, but it's fascinating in and of itself. But that's not what makes these creatures as interesting as they really are. We're going to get to that. Just bear with us. So the sperm whales, just to give you an idea, like we'll go back to like the decibel range and how they're basically with it, that clicking could kill a human who's in a close vicinity. And science adventure journalist, the man who I quoted at the beginning, whose books I highly recommend, Dive and his breath book, definitely look into James Nestor's work. Great researcher. Anyway, he's an avid ocean goer and author, and he claimed in a recent presentation that a fellow diver was swimming alongside a pod of sperm whales when one approached him out of curiosity. He put his hand up to protect himself, and his hand ended up being paralyzed for nearly 4 hours because it was bombarded by the bioecholocation, right? So it's interesting that like it's the kind of thing that we take it for granted. We just forget. We get so caught up in our lives chasing our paycheck, trying to find our next girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, that you're so involved in the way that we live that we completely ignore the fact that we live in a kind of an amazing place, and it's populated with the most interesting and amazing organisms. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah,
Care, don't care.
100%.
yeah. I was curious.
Excuse me.
I was curious if that specific sperm whale was showing restraint, because just simple communication could have. Well, maybe if it was trying to communicate across the ocean, it would have, made the guy explode or boil.
Well, when I was reading James Nestor's book Dive, he recounts a story that a free diver, because apparently sperm whales, if you're diving and you're wearing like breathing apparatus, they keep their distance. They just avoid divers wearing stuff or using any kind of equipment that's automated or driven. But if you're free diving, all you got on are a pair of fins and a mask, they become super curious, and so they'll start to interact with the divers. It's almost as though they're I don't know how exactly to characterize it, but it's almost like they're trying to have an interaction because they're fascinated by the fact that here's this creature that's not a water creature, and yet here it is trying.
In my house.
Yeah, so they're fascinated by it, so they get drawn to it. So maybe again, this might speak to their level of intelligence, or maybe what they see is something that's not that far removed from itself. Now, whether or not they actually recognize that or not, that's something we can debate. But I think you'll find it interesting as we sort of get towards the end of the note package, that when we start looking into the idea that they might be so intelligent that they actually demonstrate real language skills.
So sorry, do you know how fast they can communicate? Like, if I send you a letter, it may not get there till like 5
Oh, well,
days.
I'm gonna. Well, it apparently. Well, think about how, because I should have probably gotten that data, but I didn't get the information. So, but I would offer up this, that you think about how quickly that we communicate with each other, that they potentially that it's casual for them. There might not be a significant lag in their ability to communicate, right? So. Again, over considerable distance, maybe.
Well, if you think the speed of sound in water, that still probably.
What's the speed of sound? 700 miles per hour, right? Is that if you break the sound barrier?
I wouldn't know.
I'm fairly certain that it's 700 miles per hour, and you've exceeded this sound barrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and if sound moves faster underwater, then is it? So then, could we speculate that it might be just say around that? So if it's moving that fast, even if they were, say they were, for the sake of argument, we'll say they were like, 2,100 miles apart. So it might take a couple hours for them to hear what one's saying. So there might be a bit of a lag, but I don't know that that's nearly as incredible as the fact that they're able to overall that great distance. It'd be like you shouting and somebody in Florida from here in Ontario hearing you yell, like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Right? So I think it's that in and of itself. Again, I don't know how, because of the nature of what we are in terms of animals, that we can relate, because the scales are so radically different. But that's because we're land-based life forms, and we move through gas, oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen mixture, and they move through carbon and oxygen, like CO2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, hydrogen, oxygen, H2O, right? So they move through a water medium and stuff. So they're perfectly designed for that, and we're actually really well designed to being land-based animals. But here we are having common ground with them, right? And go ahead, you were going to say.
I was going to say, when it comes to common ground, I think the not the way they socialize, but the way they group together is interesting. The pods, and like.
Yeah, they just demonstrate complex social skills, and they behave in the way they behave much like family units.
Right.
Right.
That's what I was going to add. Just the idea of a family unit.
Well, that it does demonstrate maybe a higher order thinking, because now it's how you organize it in groups. right?
Unless they had some other form of organization like ants do, but maybe someone could argue, different intelligence.
Well, I don't know that ants are intelligent in the sense that they respond more to signals that are usually like based chemically and stuff
Yeah.
like that, right? They do, but here you have an organism that potentially does what we do, which is that we can speculate, that we wonder about things, we question our own existence and our own reality. They might not, but then again, they just may.
Right, like, sorry,
Like you said, they go up to the diver, right? They're curious, as we are curious. as
Right,
well.
right, and without any kind of lethal intent, they're just more inquisitive. They're curious by this. Hey, what are you doing, tiny brother, in the water? Like, eat you in one swallow.
Yeah, we blow you off. With
Right. So I find that really kind of just very interesting that the first non-human intelligence that we may encounter might very well have been in front of us for hundreds and thousands of years, and we just too stupid to recognize it. That to me is really astounding.
I was going to say, when it comes to ants, one thing you could look at, not that I'm trying to prove that they're intelligent, but their use of pheromones, it's more like I would say like a reactionary system. They follow the queen directly, they follow the pheromones.
Yeah, right. So then it doesn't demonstrate any kind of independent thought, right? Which is what is the impression that we get from whales, but particularly sperm whales, because when they exchange information, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like a conversation between two people, right? So in that like there's some kind of, you say something, there's a reaction, and then then they would say something, and then there's a reaction. It's not the nature of conversations as we have them, right? So speaking of the way that we have conversations, normal human speech is usually between 60 and 65 decibels. So it's just in us talking, and just think about that. Like that puts them almost 5 times as loud as we are, right? And that's within like normal speech, right? So it's crazy to think that. So the sounds they make are like that you'll hear. It's clicking sound like a. So can you imagine how annoying that might be?
Oh, especially when you're swimming and it's like going through your body, just.
So to give this all kind of context, think about how many. I'm sure you've been to live music shows, rock concerts, and their upper limits is like 115 decibels. How many times you come out of a rock show going, yeah, I can't hear a damn thing, right? Like, but it is close to the range of like shattering your drum. It's still 30 decibels, but that's pretty painful. So the sound of 180 decibels is enough to cause drastic cell death, right? So that's the one. And here these animals just, they use it to communicate, and for our fragile bodies, it would be the end, right? So it's kind of crazy. Now to get on to the language part, to why they think that they're actually communicating and demonstrating a higher order intelligence. So there's an initiative that was launched a couple of years ago, and these are the people that are doing all the research. They're referred to as Project SETI, so it stands for Cetacean Translation Initiation, right? So cetacean is the formal name for whales, right? So this organization uses interdisciplinary scientists, so scientists from different fields, all working for the towards the goal of decoding the language and the communications of sperm whales using, and here's the best part, this is crazy, and they're using artificial intelligence to try and decode their language, right? So specifically, the decoding of the clicking sounds or the echolocation sperm whales that they make are known as codas. So when they give off a series of clicks that are meant for communication, that block of clicks, they refer to as codas. And so these codas are exchanged between individuals. And when they do that informationally, it's a click a second. So it's like So it's the amount of frequency, so tone, like, so think about like when we use grammar and syntax, like, so the way we speak and the context and how we're speaking, that because the clicks can be different and they modulate in volume and stuff like that, so that they're maybe conveying something with each click. So the rapidness of the clicking could be essentially their language, right?
Well, it seems like a much more well-detailed version of Morse code.
Well, but here's an even more interesting fact. It's wonderful that you guys pointed that out. That the code is changed too, depending on the different depths that they're at. So when they're descending and ascending, the type of coders they're using change as well. So I don't know if that's because like they're holding their breath for such extended periods, right, to get to depth and stuff. So that might change the way that they're speaking. So it'd be like us going,
Yeah.
Right.
What if it had something to do with if they're in lower or if they're in higher pressure areas, deeper in the sea, they might have to alternate how I'm gonna say their voicing reverberates.
Right. That's not that. It's very likely like that the pressure at the varying depths has an effect on how they communicate. So I don't.
It's like
so
yelling distance.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's fair to say that it's only changing based on the environmental changes. It's like you having a conversation on a spring sunny day and then in the middle of a blizzard trying to have the same conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Right? Like that for it just affects the way you're going to communicate. So that's, I don't think it's too unrealistic then to see that's affecting like how they communicate. Again, based on pressures, right? So the researchers are using a natural language processing, an NLP, a subfield of AI focused on processing written and spoken languages. So this AI has been applied to like human languages, and its precision is crazy good. But it requires billions of data points for it to be able to unlock languages that we know exist. So it's because we already know the languages, it confirms what we know, right? And it demonstrates how it does it. It essentially creates a map using all these different data points, and then correlates behavior with reoccurring vocalizations, and so then you're able to get syntax or context out of what's being said, because you can match the vocalization or the echolocation with specific behavior. So that becomes you can start building the understanding or translation of a language based on that, right? So so it's really promising when they applied this algorithm, then NLP algorithm, to the sperm whales. But here's the real crunch. It's a huge hurdle. They require data, and the goal is to collect 4 billion codas from the sperm whales. So even if they were constantly doing it, it would take years for them to produce enough data points that they could be able to start kind of decoding the language, right? So currently the existing research is being done in in the Caribbean Sea, and where the projects where they're looking at, because they're common areas for pods, and they've managed to collect about 100,000 codas, and that's in 2 years. And they need like 5 billion, right? So you can begin to appreciate then the complexity of the project, like that. For it to really be able to get there, they need like to make considerable effort. So I would just offer this up. If there's any value in this, the amount of money that gets pumped into the war machines of the planet, and I just take it for what it is, that if you devoted a small portion of that to enriching these programs to be able to unlock the language of sperm whales, that it would be more than worth the money that you spent. Far better spent than better ways to kill each other, right? So I just put that out there, take it for what it is, right? And would you guys like to contribute anything to that? No?
I swear, if they ever do that, it's just because they want to know how to blow up people underwater. Just a little bit more efficiently.
It makes you wonder then the weaponizing sound, right? That's for another episode.
They could use the clicks that they make and play them underwater to communicate with the whale.
Yeah, but to figure out what they're saying to each other, that's why they need the data points. That's what makes it significant, because that's what could potentially unlock the language. Now, whether in doing that, whether they're able to actually unlock the language to a degree that we're actually able to have an exchange with them, so it could play out in a number of ways. So one, we could end up having a real complex, deep ability to communicate with them potentially, or the languages are their language is so radically different that we'd only be able to overlap with their language and our language in a small way. So we'd only be able to in a rudimentary kind of way, a real basic way, be able to communicate with them, right? But the potential is there for it to be either like, even in a base communication, like, what are you? Do you know what we are? Like,
how's the water?
God, can you imagine?
Where's Atlantis?
Already going there, right? So just giving a comparison, like when we were talking about how they've managed to collect 100,000 of these codas so far in the last couple of years. So the GPT-3 is a well-known deep learning predictive language model, which was trained using roughly 175 billion words to be able to, that's what it required to be able to unlock other languages, languages we already knew, but for the algorithm to be I don't want to call it a universal translator, but for the algorithm to be a translator, it needed that much data from a language that we already knew, like words, so that it could actually begin to make the correlations and then be able to translate whatever language the algorithm was confronted with to translate, right? So you can imagine then the requirement to actually figure out what sperm whales are saying to each other and how to say something to them in sperm whalian. That's a thing.
And the technology is only going to get better from here.
Well,
ChatGPT.
It's ChatGPT. So ChatGPT4 was the last version. They already have they have a 4 now. So as the technology evolves, then the capacity might be greater and greater. So again, it's one of those things. It's kind of like, it's too early for us to really say definitively one way or the other where this is all going, right? And how this could potentially play out, right? It is actually feasibly possible that the language model could develop that could communicate in the native tongues of whales, which could permanently alter the way humans perceive and interact with nature. I don't think there's anybody who would dispute that. So if the first foray for us, especially if we could unlock their language to a degree that we could have a really in-depth conversation with them, like to speak to the kind of depth, the kind of conversations that we have among ourselves, that might radically alter our worldview. Because here we kept thinking that what would change everything is why I started out with with all the news about UFOs or UAPs, that if it'd be the equivalent to having aliens land on the White House lawn, like, take me to your leader. That the way we always thought of an event like that, how much it would alter us as a species, potentially we could have that with whales. So they didn't need to come from another planet or from the other side of the universe or galaxy. They're here.
They've been here.
Yeah. And the worst thing is that we've been hunting them, and in some cases we eat them. I go, so what kind of a cannibal does that make you? Is it intellectual cannibals? Like you eat other things that are not the same as you, but demonstrate the same kind of like high order capacity. And that's kind of, it's almost creepy weird, the fact that we would do that and be okay with that, but yet we do. So, any thoughts?
If we say to the whales, you know, hey, sorry, we didn't know. I feel like we still have a long conversation to go.
I can only begin to imagine. But what if they, like in terms of context, they couldn't relate? Maybe because they're in the case of the sperm whales, they're predators. They hunt, right? And they hunt, and their prey's large. And we only just recently discovered that like those enormous squid do exist. So when they're diving to those, and they're one of the deepest diving mammals on the planet. What do you think they're hunting? Those giant squid, right? That's what they eat.
The incredible thing is that they don't eat free divers.
Well, because
It's probably too small.
maybe yeah.
It's nothing to them. If they're looking for a meal. They want something big.
It'd be like eating one chicken McNugget.
Exactly.
Hey, I've seen people hunt chickadees. I didn't see.
But so maybe, getting back to what I was trying to say, was that maybe because they're predators and the fact that we've hunted them, that they see that as just a natural part of existence, right? And so maybe they don't have feelings about it. Maybe they do. But, you know, when you read like books like Moby Dick, the impression is that, because it was a book written about the whale hunting of the 17th century, that it was a pissed off whale who decided to get even with one particular man for what he had done. All right, and I don't know about you guys, but I remember that being a movie watching when I was growing up, all those many years ago, and it was one of those things that kind of like borderline terrified me. You know, like, here's this monster of the sea, and got an axe to grind with one guy, and kills his whole crew, sinks his ship just to throw it into him, right? But it's a fair question. Would they even respond to our behaviors in an emotional way?
There's this, I think the movie is called Arrival, where there's aliens that communicated through imagery. So they would create these ink blocks.
Yeah, I remember the movie.
Yeah, it could be along the same lines. Like, the context and subtext we use is so just completely different. We have no idea what's going on.
But they experience. So it's interesting that you bring that up. Those squid-like creatures that you're talking about from that movie, they experience time differently. They saw past, present, and future simultaneously. I don't know if you got that from the movie. I'm fairly certain that's what happened.
Yeah.
So their experience of time was radically different. So when they communicated, we communicate because of around the context of our linear perception of time. What if whales don't have a perception of time? There's no today or tomorrow or yesterday for them. There's just now. They don't there's only now. They are only concerned with right now. They don't ruminate like we do on the past or project on the future.
We also build structures because we have to settle down. They never settle down.
Well, they're constant nomads, but that's because of the nature of their habitat. They live in water. We live on land, right? And to be fair, we're complex tool makers. They don't make tools.
Yeah, we're made to adapt. They're made more or less to...
They're perfectly adapted to living in water.
Right.
But we can adapt to virtually any kind of habitat.
Just because they have so much specific, effort put towards communication, I assume that that's one of their main modes of being, just communication.
Well, what if? Okay, here, that's interesting that you point that out. So their vocalizations then become like the foundation for their social orders, their culture, if they experience culture in the way that we would recognize as culture. So the complexity of that 25% of that echolocation that they do, what if it's embedded with history? Because if it's a binary code, like if it's ones and zeros and stuff, then in the context of the language that they're communicating in, is there more information in there? So something that would actually maybe tell us maybe more about the history of the planet, because that's how they communicate, unless it's not relevant to them, right? Like, so again, it goes back to, is time even a concept that they're aware of? Do they even recognize the fact that there's, that there's day and night and stuff? Do they even care? If they do even recognize it, do they even care? Is it even relevant to them?
Not when you're in the depths.
No, but they can't stay at depth. They have to constantly come to the surface. They can dive for, like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you'll forgive me, but I believe it's like for an hour to 2 hours at a time, right?
I'm wondering if they can layer, like, not just one voicing, but multiple voicings.
Well, it makes you wonder, because of the range, the decibel range they can go through. That maybe and because they're clicking every second, there's a click a second, that and that they're almost always clicking. So we kind of, to us, silence is really powerful. Do they even experience silence, or are they constantly just hearing? It's just noise, always noise, always, and that for them, that they're perfectly adjusted to it. So to them, it's not even noise. It's just the nature of their environment. For us, if you're constantly bombarded by that, it drives you nuts, right?
Yeah, they call them whale songs. I don't want to listen to that all the time. But, like, it is quite beautiful, and you got to ask, is there intelligence behind that?
Well, it does make you wonder, and clearly these people who are studying it, they think there is, because of these codas, because the way they package, it's the complexity of the way they package the sounds. So this is what I'm saying. So because it's a block of sounds. It's not like one sound for like one word like we do. They do a block. Is that entire block then carry a significant message in it?
Well, maybe if you think about the way we structure sentences and the paragraphs,
right?
It could be complexity within itself, but it's also representative of the overall message. Like, it could get extremely complex.
Okay, so then could you have a current message that's relevant to their interaction, and then within that current message, you layer, like, they layer a history, or layer their own personal history that each of the individuals, like
their
that's
own syntax,
right? That so it's coded into their communications. That, this is who I am. This is my history. I came from these two whales, and you know what I mean, like that.
And then there's also the message, like danger, area of danger.
Well, but
what
if they're way more specific? They're able to identify right down. That bastard has blue eyes and blonde hair, and
he did the Gulf oil spill.
Well, to be fair, because of the amount of shipping that goes on worldwide, and a lot of the shipping lanes cross into the whales' habitat. So a lot of whales get struck by, like, human fish, not fishing vessels, but shipping vessels, right? Shipping ships, like, so big container ships are moving stuff around the planet and stuff. They end up in the whales' lanes, so whales end up getting killed as a result of that. And then it was 2016s, there was a peak kind of warming in the oceans, which was actually hugely negative to not just the whale populations, but a lot of marine life did not respond well, because it was unusual warming period. So it'd be the equivalent of us having a summer where you're just having, like, grueling heat, right? Where which you would think about it for us here in Ontario, where if you have like 3 weeks in a row of like 30+ degrees, it's a heat wave, right? And people succumb to the pressure from the heat, right? Like that, it brings their life to an end. So they're susceptible in the same way. So their populations have just started rebounding and stuff, all this. So now it would be almost 8-9 years later, 7 years later. So again, would they have an interesting story to tell if we could communicate with them? What kind of questions might they have? Why do you guys kill each other all the time? because even though they're predators of the sea, I'm not aware of them attacking and killing each other.
Mhm.
Right? But we do it all the time, like all the time.
Oh yeah, I think you mentioned before we started recording, there's they got a signal from a younger whale.
Oh yeah. Oh, so when they have newborns, in sperm whale pods, they've recorded again signals across different generations and different groups. So the early young, they're in their first 2 years when they record their codas, it's gibberish. Right, so and so they equate that to be the equivalent. Like, think of the first 2 years of a human child. That, well, it's much longer than 2 years. But by the time a young child starts vocalizing, their first vocalization, they're just mimicking us. It's gibberish. They're not really saying anything. Right?
Yeah, that's the thing. So many animals do mimic. So you could say, oh, bats have intelligence, or you could say, well, they're mimicking behavior to get a treat.
But they, even it's
But with
interesting.
whales, it's different though. You
Uh,
can see them learning. Like, in order to communicate, you have to learn how to communicate.
right.
Unless they have some higher order, not higher, I don't want to say higher, I don't want to imply they're intelligent. But in order to...
I'll go on a limb and I'll just say that they are. Like, I don't think proof of, like, translating their language as proof that they're intelligence. I don't need the translation to know that they are.
Right, just the fact that they have...
Complex social structures, they
Yeah.
behave like in complex social groups. To me, that's super suggestive, right? Is it definitive evidence? No. But like I said, I'm willing to go out on a limb and state for the record, and very publicly too, I might add, that to me they seem like the first alien intelligence ever, and they're not aliens. They've been here for a long time. I think the general held view, based on fossil records, is they're about 25 to 30 million years they've been around, sperm whales, right? So I go, compared to us, it's a significant amount of time. And if they're really higher order intelligence, what if they commune with the universe in a way that we can't even begin to imagine, because they are conscious?
They're probably receptive of whatever
What-
interference you get in water.
Or maybe they have they're not their level of awareness isn't kind of restricted like ours. I'll go back to the example that you gave of the movie, The Arrival, and those alien squid creatures who didn't perceive time in the same way. Well, what if these sperm whales, they connect with the natural world in a way that we can't? Because we're not designed to. Because we don't have the capacity to, because we don't have a 17-pound brain, right? But they do. You do? You do?
I was going to add this, like, even though we can say that it seems woo-woo to assume, like, there's this deeper connection to the natural world, you look at some animals, they have ultraviolet sight. We would never know that's a real thing.
Right. So that means that they have a different... It changes the nature of their experience of reality in a way that we can't relate, because we don't do that, but they do, right? So, and maybe that's why they're fascinated by us, like that we're the landlubbers who get in the water and try and hold our breath as long as we can and swim around with them and stuff. So maybe to them they're impressed. They're like going, here, like, is this the first chance where you're not trying to, like, hunt us for the oil in our oil sack, you son of a bitch.
What if that's word for word what they say?
Well, I doubt they'd have those. Imagine their version of obscenities, right?
I'm surprised they didn't just start clicking if they were getting hunted all the time. If they clicked and kill a human, then what would
but you'd have to be in the water for, like, because I don't know that they could direct it out of the water. Like, maybe they could, but again, harnessing their sound, like, to kill something. That's probably how they hunt those squid. They probably stun them with the upper.
Mhm.
That's why they have that upper range. So if we know at, like, I'm sorry, what was the decibel range that caused death between 180 and 200?
Yeah.
So and their upper range is like 230, so maybe they would, like, blast one with, like, a 220, say, decibel range, and only catch a piece of it.
Yeah.
But then you render it it's wounded, and then they just go in for the finish and, like, Calamari.
I think another interesting animal to check out would be, or insect would be bees. Even though they, even though I wouldn't say they necessarily have intelligence, it's just the mechanics they use are super interesting.
Well, but again, I think it's because they don't demonstrate intelligence. They have an enormous function in the natural world in
Right.
terms of being able to, like, they're the reason the natural world is in the way that it is. They're the ones who they pollinate other plants and allow for the proliferation of, like, all, like, plants, right? So their roles, not to minimize their role, but in terms of intelligence, they're not demonstrating intelligence. They're designed perfectly for a specific function. Whereas we ask questions, and because we have the capacity to ask questions, that allows us the ability to do radically different things. You're not tied to a biological function. Bees have a biological function. Ants have a biological function. And although sperm whales are driven by biological requirements, they spend, how much of their life do they spend just socializing among themselves like we do, their interactions? So then do they question their reality? What if that's the nature of the conversations we have with them? What if they're profound philosophers? Or, like, again, it's just a wild speculation on my part, but what if that's what we end up discovering? So then we end up, so then moving forward, we would end up having a complex relationship with them. And then suddenly you start to see that, hey, maybe we need to start paying attention to how we're managing the planet. And maybe that we should be a lot more thoughtful and mindful about what we do. And that, or even go so far as to take full responsibility and go, here, we're the custodians of all this shit. And that what we should be doing is behaving in such a way that we intercede, not recklessly like we currently do, but that we step in and that we do everything we can to foster not just growth but more of it, to make everything better, to act as a catalyst for even greater positive changes, not negative ones. So you don't have like a floating island of fucking garbage in the middle of the fucking ocean, right? That we clean up our shit. That we manage the natural world in such a way that now that we turn it into this really rich, robust garden that's populated.
I was just thinking, yeah, the old term, the old adage, it's like, oh, I can't believe it, I forgot already.
It's okay, huh?
Yeah,
Too much pot. It's okay. We live in Canada.
Essentially, take care of your garden, grow your garden.
Yeah, that's
And we're built for that.
right. And I think that it's because of opposable thumbs, our ability to walk, eyes up high in our head, to give us a wide field of vision. I think we're perfectly designed to not just interact with the reality that we're in, but to act in a way to cultivate this. And I'm not talking about being farmers. I mean, like, we richly participate in the way the natural world operates and functions. We encourage and support it, and directly through our actions. Right, so we actively take part in managing the natural world, and we do it in a constructive, beneficial kind of way. I think if there's any kind of lesson that would come from a non-human intelligence that's Earth-based, that's not from another planet, how could there be any other conclusion? We have tons of problems on our own. We have tons of homeless people. We have people struggling with mental health issues, incredibly on incredible rise. It's clear we don't have our shit together. But maybe this would, discovering that we could talk to another intelligence, would be the push to start taking care of our own shit in a very real, meaningful way, instead of a way where it basically just serves to the benefit of just a small minority of us. So it's either we're really all in this together, or we just keep going down this road where we're just going to fuck each other over, and you keep plying each other for your own advantage, and it leads to, like, well, basically nowhere, right? I'm not interested in that shit, and I'm not like, and I'm not I've been accused of being a granola eating tree hugger. What Birkenstock granola eating tree hugger, I think is how somebody referred. Or right after I knocked a tooth out of his mouth. That's not a confession. I didn't do anything like that at all. But if his tooth did come out, it wasn't because I punched him in the face. So having said that, I don't know any hippie that would do that to you. But on this, I stand firm. We need that if the idea that sperm whales could potentially be equally as intelligent as us, then it deserves us to stop behaving like spoiled children, start acting like, well, mature adults. I mean, that's the choice. This is what we're stuck with. This is the world, and the world that we live in is a direct result of what we've chosen to do and not do. We made it, so we can unmake it. We can make it so that it better serves each and every one of us and every other living thing on it. Now, if you would characterize that as being a hippie, okay, maybe I am, right? But the reality is that this is the only planet we got, right? So to be reckless and to conduct your stuff in a selfish, kind of self-interested way, it's counterintuitive. And to me, I find it incredible that others don't see that they don't respond in that way. Do you guys have any feelings with regards to that? You got anything you'd like to?
We're indoctrinated into it, so we're.
So what do you mean? You're good with just everything being disposable?
It's I feel like there's a new change. Like with younger people, there's a lot of people who just seem completely unable to like come to grips with not what reality is, but how we socialize, why we socialize, what our goals are. Like it comes down to what's the meaning and like what's the long-term purpose.
I think
we're sold on the idea, if you're lucky, you get an office job like the 90s and then you die. It's like
that's horrible. What a horrible way. Okay, so
it's that or you do a lot of drugs and you die.
Okay, but either way, you end up with basically 6 feet under. So here's the argument that I would make, that then maybe then at least start by asking yourself the question, what is my purpose and what is my meaning? And I would also offer this, that you create it. It doesn't have to be what you were told and led to believe that it is. Yes, you have to take into consideration the fact that you need access to resources, because there's basic needs that you have to meet, right? Place to sleep, food, shelter, warmth, clothing, all that stuff. All those things are real, but it's all about balance. And so if the only thing that you're concerned with is a good paycheck, so you can have all the spoils that you can like drown in food, sex, and drugs, so that you can die comfortable, just kind of empty. No wonder mental health issues are on the rise. Why wouldn't they be? Everyone's completely dissatisfied because you don't know how to find satisfaction in life. So then where does it come from?
The phone.
Your phone.
Internet,
it comes from your
TV.
phone.
It's not real satisfaction.
Okay, or then it requires you to ask serious questions. What is my purpose? What is meaningful to me? So, and then if you say, well, if life's meaningful to me, then it's not just your life. It has to be all life. Because if the only life that's meaningful to you is yours, that can be characterized as being selfish, self-interested. So to serve yourself best, then it might be fair to say then it would be best to serve others first, right? They take responsibility for everything, not just your life, but you do it first by helping hand to the person standing next to you, beside you, in front of you, and behind you. And as an analogy, is not, what if the sperm whales are intelligent? Don't we have then a sense of obligation, responsibility to them? Even if they're not intelligent, don't we have a responsibility, obligation to basically every other living thing? And if the answer is no, and that's the answer you choose, then you need to shut up and be okay with the shittiness that you experience in your life, because it won't get better. It's just going to continue to get shittier.
Yeah, if you don't care about other animals' lives, other animals won't
Just
care about you.
other living things, period.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't, I think we compartmentalize everything to understand things, to make sense of everything. So we label it. We start to believe in the labels. Where, you know, that life is valuable. All life is valuable. Does it have any kind of transcendental kind of qualities to it? Maybe, maybe not. But that's not relevant. What's relevant is right now. And what are we doing for each other? And if you can characterize what we're currently doing to and for each other as either manipulation or taking advantage of it, exploiting them, we did to the sperm whales. We hunted them for fucking oil, for lamps and fucking candles and lubricants. Are you fucking kidding? And then yet somehow we represent the highest expression of sophistication and intelligence.
We hurt each other for stupid reasons too.
And so many of us in these extremely wealthy countries, so many of us end up living on the streets. You go, well, wait, what does that actually say about us? And for those who would dismiss it, fuck you. You don't get to fucking enjoy all the benefits of the society and then go and turn your back on all the negative parts of it. Clearly, it's not working. All right? And you don't get to sit there and say, well, I don't care. I don't care. I only care about what I want. Well, okay, but then you should be fully okay with anybody exploiting you to their advantage. Right?
I actually think that's, I'm not going to argue for it, but more or less it seems like that's the system we're already sold on. We're taken advantage of, and we take advantage of ourselves.
Yeah, but and each other. So it's just exploitation piled on top of exploitation piled, and then and that includes everything, not just us. There's nothing that we don't exploit.
Our legal system.
Everything, all of it.
Everything for your own personal gain.
Right. Well, it's actually we do it to serve ourselves, but it's all set up so that it serves a small minority of us who benefit the most from it. Right? And I'm like going, haven't we had enough? Isn't that enough? Isn't there better things that we could be doing with our time? Like communicating with the whales, managing the natural world in a better, more constructive, positive way. Being smart. You know, look, for so many of us on this planet, their existence is hell. And I'm not talking about the assholes who are tied to the $1,000 fucking phones. Travel the world and you'll see human beings living in deplorable conditions. And yet, as long as you got your social media and you have 500,000 followers, and then it's all good. It's not all good. Right? Maybe that's the lesson that'll come from. Because you imagine if they for the sake of argument, sperm whales represent a capacity equal to our own, and their question is, why do you guys do that?
Yeah, why do you have people in mines that are children pulling out minerals for iPhones?
Right.
Or any phone.
Right. Why do you do that? And how are we going to answer them? Oh, because we're selfish and fucking rotten to the core because we don't give a shit about nothing except ourselves? And as horrible as an answer as that may be, it might be kind of accurate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's a logical conclusion if you look at everything that's going around, especially, well, actually, if you look at recorded history, I don't think there was ever a time where we did the right thing necessarily.
Okay.
We care for each other only in our local communities, like right in front of us, right beside us.
Right.
So you care for your family as best as you can. I feel like that's the most justice you can find.
Yeah, but at the expense of, well, we have that. And I don't see it correcting anything. I don't see it having a broader impact. So if we're so all right, so you're not just looking out for your own self. Your small unit, family unit You'll do anything and exploit others so that to preserve the integrity of your family unit, but at the expense of someone else's.
Yeah.
It's still the same shit going on. So I don't see where the benefit in any of that. And like I said, could you imagine if their question is, why do you do that? So here's this non-human intelligence that's a native to this planet going, hey, you hunted us for oil, you ate us, and you fuck each other over for financial advantage.
I think
Maybe you guys are the animals.
Mm-hmm.
I think we would come back with some answers, but they would be super contradictory. Like, oh, we're not competent. Well, you're competent enough to kill all the whales. We're scared. That's why we need the oil. Like, you weren't scared enough to go out of your element into mine, where I can blow you up, and then hunt the sack on their head to hunt
The
that.
spermaceti oil.
Right.
from-
So it's all short-term thinking
Right.
on our part.
Right. So, and maybe that's the problem. We
Oh.
only have short-term thinking, and the ability to be able to translate their language. If the only thing you got from the discussion about chat GPT, was I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That it's going to take years to be able to do it. So you have to have a long-term vision, which we very rarely express. We don't demonstrate that. Everything's short term. My gain. What do I gain right now? Immediate gratification, satisfaction. Don't care about you. Get out of my way.
Oh, I can't help but to mention the one shooting from the hip we did on John Calhoun's Universe 25.
Yeah.
Totally relates to the subject, I believe. Like where we're at now, it doesn't relate to whales whatsoever.
Well, we could render ourselves completely inert, and then guess who'd be the dominant species on the planet? Whales.
What if that's what we're doing?
That's a fair question. What if it is?
I think that's
Or
what you're pointing
statement.
to.
What if that's what we're doing? We're rendering ourselves extinct, obsolete. It's because and because we willfully choose short-sightedness over a long-term vision. So, what would you say would be a long-term vision? The idea of like enhancing human interactions among humans and all other living things, and then have a focal point where we look at the planet differently and we go, here, this is our home, instead of shitting in the living room, that we actually start to make it this beautiful place.
Right.
It's already beautiful, but we're making it dirty.
I've heard so many claims that the nitrogen-rich fertilizer we're using is destroying the top layer of soil. The issue is we do have regenerative farming. It's just not something that you can mass produce at the scale that it's profitable to a company.
Okay, so
we could feed each other. We
Right.
have enough food on this planet for all of us.
Okay, so again, but that means that it would require us to then neutralize someone's ability to generate profit, right? And I love capitalism, but if you think this is capitalism, you're sadly mistaken. Capitalism is completely decentralized. When it's this centralized, it's something else,
At least a monopoly.
right?
I hate that
I'm
game.
just going to go that far as to state that. I'm not. I don't want to go any further than that. But it'd be fair to say, right? Once you have that kind of centralization, then what are you? You answer the question. I'm posing it to you, right? And I don't want to have to like try and explain this to a non-human intelligence who would sit there and go, "You guys are insane."
Yeah.
Can you imagine the response? That's the best answer you could offer up for why you conduct yourselves in the way that you do. You're crazy. Well, we don't have to be. We could be a whole lot of things, right? And now I'm feeling a great deal of shame, because if I could communicate with this creature, I'm like, I don't even know how I would fairly try and represent us. Because if it was too positive, it'd be kind of dishonest and disingenuous. Because like as great as we are, and we have enormous capacity. We can do fantastic things. We're still like rolling around in the shit.
Say that to them. We're confusing. We're contradictory. We think we care, but we don't know.
All of those things are accurate, and I don't know how much. I don't know how better to say it or to state it. But now the idea of like interacting with intelligence that are non-human, I'm like, I don't know that we could offer up a compelling argument or to explain in such a way that it would make sense the things that we do. It doesn't even make sense to us.
I would just shrug my shoulders, and then they
Do
would
that.
ask, "What does that mean? I don't have shoulders. You're shoulder phobic."
Show their fins.
You're holding it against me. Can I get a time check?
Yeah, we're 1 hour 10 minutes in. It's 8:36 right now.
Okay, so I think
Pretty late.
I think it's I think it's okay on this occasion to sum this one up. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, no,
Appreciate
really
you being
great
here.
time.
Yeah.
A lot of things to do.
So this was an interesting conversation and interesting dive, if pardon the pun. Thanks, Slim, as always.
No problem.
It's always great to get together and chew the fat. Look towards other episodes. We're not done with sound yet, but I didn't want to. I thought the idea of non-human intelligence already being here that could potentially be equal to our own, something worthy of conversation by itself. And again, it's just, you can only speculate as to what that interaction might look like. But like I said, I wasn't expecting to come away from this like the conversation going feeling a bit ashamed, but I do. I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting that. But here we are, and yet here we are. So I would offer up to anyone who's listening to this, you should question everything, and you might want to start with questioning yourself. Aspire to be a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical, objective thinker, and just put your best foot forward. I love you all. Thank you for showing up. Have a great night.